to the United States now, where raids have been reported in several cities as President Donald Trump follows through on his promise to stop irregular migration. Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, joined operations in Chicago, where irregular migrants and their families aren't the only ones in fear of the enforcement effort.
Early morning raids in Chicago carried out as part of nationwide operations. These images of what the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency called targeted raids had an immediate effect across the city. In the city's Little Village neighborhood, known as the Mexico of the Midwest, the streets were noticeably quieter than usual, and not just because of the frigid temperatures.
It's fear. Many here have watched the news and people are very afraid. I think it's that, and yes, also the temperature, that it is very cold. I think it's a mixture of both.
Matter of fact, there's a friend of mine, she is usually on the next block over, and she's not here no more. She's a vendor, and she's not here. And I noticed a couple other vendors, they're not around. More than less likely, they're probably undocumented and they're afraid to come out.
It's what President Trump said that is affecting a lot of businesses. There are people who are afraid to go shopping or visit restaurants because they are scared of those things.
For many restaurant employees, it's already noticeable.
By now, there should be more people here. There should be more movement. It has been like this since Inauguration Day, but there was a decrease even before with less people here. It feels strange on the streets. People are more stressed. Many don't know what might happen tomorrow.
A question that many business owners are also asking themselves. Some are already raising the alarm.
Businesses, we have heard from several that about 50 to 60% loss, the amount of people who are coming in. Usually this is a slower time of the year, but it's been way slower than normal time, right? And if people aren't coming in, then business owners are going to be faced with that difficult decision of whether they, cut some of their employees or maybe cut a shift so that they close earlier. So it's going to have a heavy economic impact.
And apart from customers not coming in, there are other economic concerns.
There are estimates that half of all of those working in the restaurant industry in the state of Illinois, where Chicago is located, are migrants themselves, and especially those who don't have their paperwork. It's a fear that they might try to avoid their workplaces, thinking that not only some customers, but also they themselves might be victims of these raids.
Well, DWs Benjamin Albarg Gruber filed that report from Chicago, as we just saw, and he joins us now from there. Benjamin, great to see you. So there appears to be a real sense of fear among the people you were talking to, right?
That's right, and even if the people have not seen ICE, have not seen immigration and customs enforcement agents, they move in different cars, so it's not the normal police cars. But there was a lot of fear talking to street vendors, talking to people in the restaurants, even those who are legally here. We tried to talk to them also to get them in front of the camera to share this feeling of fear. We had a couple of voices in there, but it's because they're also saying even if they have the paperwork and if they can be here, those places, if ICE actually shows up, they might actually also ask them for the papers. So there is a lot of fear and a lot of uncertainty what that would mean, not just for the businesses, as we just saw in the report that we filed from Little Village, but also what it will mean to family members or maybe friends that may be affected by these promised raids.
Now, Benjamin, do stand by because we're going to listen now to Trump's press secretary, who described Trump's deportation policy as a big cultural shift. Let's listen in.
Is focused on launching the largest mass deportation operation in American history of illegal criminals. And if you are an individual, a foreign national, who illegally enters the United States of America, you are, by definition, a criminal. And so therefore, you are subject to deportation. I know the last administration didn't see it that way, so it's a big culture shift in our nation to view someone who breaks our immigration laws as a criminal, but that's exactly what they are.
So, Benjamin, basically the Trump administration has described people living in the United States illegally as criminals. So what message is this sending out to the millions of people in that situation? Essentially to live in fear, right?
They live in fear, and it's psychological, not knowing what might happen to them. We've heard from parents who are too afraid to take their children to school, to go out, to meet friends. So there is indeed a lot of fear, because the administration was saying if you have not committed a crime, you shouldn't be worried. These are targeted raids that are being carried out. But as we just heard there from the new White House press secretary during her first press briefing in the White House, if they say that everyone who came into the U.S. irregularly is a criminal, then everyone would be in danger of these deportations. We hear that there are so many new messages and executive orders being signed by the White House. We had one earlier today affecting Venezuelans who live here in this country legally. There was something, a humanitarian parole that was extended in the last weeks of the Biden administration under then the Minister of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas. It was revoked now, so people who are living here legally are not sure what they could mean for them and for family members who are living in fear, many of them avoiding going out to not be at risk of these deportations that are happening also, especially in sanctuary cities like Chicago, where the Trump administration, wants to send a signal, of course, for the politicians that are in charge here.
Paint a picture for us. What happens to people who are arrested or detained?
So first, ICE, as I said, they use different vehicles. They want to go or find certain people. They are then sent to detention centers where they are being questioned. The White House is saying, and using also on social media, saying that it's only people that committed crimes. We've heard other reports. So there's a lot of reports. Of course, we have to be very careful with confirming that information that is being sent out also by NGOs. We heard that they are on high alert, that they are communicating with local politicians. So in case something like this happens, they tell people to record these raids, to tell them that they also have rights, that they should know, have, for example, phone numbers of other people. That is the advice that they are giving to those who might be in one of those situations where they take their kids, for example, to school and can't come back. But that's a lot of signaling and a lot of new policies that are being implemented, and it's very, very quick. But we see that it's already having an impact, because only having those pictures on television of seeing Trump's border czar Tom Homan taking part in those operations here, having Dr. Phil, a TV host, of course, scares many people already. Even if they don't see ICE, they know that that's happening, and that's leading for them to try to stay at home as much as possible.
Now, you're in the state of Illinois. The governor there, J.B. Pritzker, says Donald Trump will not have a free hand to operate in the state. Is there any sign of resistance from local authorities across the United States?
So the situation of Chicago is a sanctuary city is different. We also know that in other states, like for example California is a sanctuary state. There are other cities that have additional measures in place or policy to prevent ICE, to prevent this immigration and customs enforcement officials of working with local authorities or working with police. We recently saw a social media post by the mayor of Chicago saying that police is not involved in those raids. So ICE is doing that alone, and they are also not giving them additional information. And that's something where many schools or many churches are afraid of giving them this access. You just mentioned the governor of Illinois. We've heard that some local politicians have vowed to fight back, have vowed to protect the migrant communities who are living in fear. But this is not just about policies, it's also about signaling. And with the latest news that we heard from the White House of President Biden announcing that he will sign an executive order instructing both the Department of Defense and Homeland Security to build a detention facility at Guantanamo Bay that might house up to 30,000 people. That's the number that he said is sending a signal, as they have many measures using what they have on the Department of Justice side of the Department of Homeland Security, having these deportation flights in military transport machines that we covered last week in El Paso. So a couple of measures that they're announcing of what they say are fulfilling one of the main campaign promises, that is tackling irregular migration in this country.
Certainly a big shift in the past several days in the United States. We'll leave it there. Benjamin Albarg joining us from Chicago.
And earlier, I asked our reporter in Washington, Stephan Simons, to tell us more about Trump's plan to send migrants to Guantanamo Bay.
Well, according to the president, this is his new plan. He will sign the executive order at any point in time now. And he's envisioning Guantanamo Bay, a different facility from what we normally know or understand Guantanamo Bay is, to host and to house up to 30,000 criminal illegal migrants in the United States. Well, those 30,000 criminal illegal migrants have to be caught first, then brought to this different facility. And one caveat, officials say behind the curtain that there is no way this facility, this migrant facility, which always existed in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, that this will hold 30,000 people. So that was maybe so in the 90s, but that's not the case anymore. Now, the president is adamant about it. He said this will double the capacity of the United States to house and hold those really bad criminals. Illegal criminals who, he says, that he doesn't even want to send back to their home countries because their home countries can't be trusted to actually keep them there. So that's the whole spiel. Guantanamo Bay, a different Guantanamo Bay, not the facility where terrorists, still 15, are housed, will be opened to receive criminal illegal immigrants from the United States, according to the president.
OK, Stephan, now tell us, is this plan by Trump likely to succeed, given what you've just said?
Well, good question. Maybe a trick question. It could, it probably will, but there are some hurdles to take. Number one, follow the money. Who's paying for all of this? And second question, the military is heavily involved or would be heavily involved in this. This expands, so to speak, the definition of how to use military assets, Pentagon, US military, for the detention of illegal immigrants and transportation, because they have to get somehow to Guantanamo Bay first, right? Envision this in military transporters, etc., etc. Then you have to increase the staff. A lot more US military personnel would have to be stationed there. That all comes with a lot of costs. Plus the question, is it that easy that the president can expand the role of the US military? And that is maybe something lawyers, attorneys, and Congress has to answer. So there are obstacles potentially, but it might succeed.
OK, now Guantanamo Bay does have quite a controversial history. Could you tell us a bit about that and the US activities there?
Yeah, of course. So now we're back Guantanamo Bay from yesteryears. That is where foreign militants were housed, 750 at its peak, and that comes from the time of the war on terrorism. You'll remember 2001, after the 9/11 attacks, George W. Bush, former President George W. Bush, established Guantanamo just in 2002, and anybody who was caught by US military assets in the war on terror was sent to Guantanamo Bay. There are still 15, the most famous of them all. Maybe you will remember the name, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the so-called architect of the 9/11 attacks. He's still there since 2006. The oldest prisoner still there, in terms of time spent there, was detained there, or arrested and then detained in Guantanamo Bay in 2002. So he spent, well, 23 years in Guantanamo Bay in lockup. And again, 15 are still there. But again, the migrants, what Trump's plan is to send migrants to Guantanamo Bay. That is a different facility in Guantanamo Bay held by the United States military.
Stephan Simons in Washington there. Thanks a lot for that, Stephan.